Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm your host, Tom White, along with my co-host, Kevin Hinks. But let's welcome in our next guest, and that's going to be Megan Brantley. She is a vice president of research at LikeFolio.com. We're talking Tesla today. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
So I'm guessing, from having you on past shows, we're going to probably be pretty positive as far as data and sentiment goes on Tesla. But I think this is a key report because we get a lot of the data from a lot of the automakers before their earnings, and they had record deliveries in December when they announced that. But what's your data showing on this side? Because the stock has pulled back pretty significantly from its all-time highs.
Yeah, this is one of those names, reminds me of Costco, where they kind of tip their hands and get ahead of our data because we were kind of anticipating the massive amount of deliveries that they reported earlier this month. And so whenever we look at Tesla, the things that we can't gauge, we can't necessarily gauge their profitability, how much it costs for them to achieve these deliveries. And we can't really gauge, what their production capacity looks like or what that's going to ramp to. But what we can gauge is how consumers are reporting their experiences with the vehicle are, and how happy are consumers with Teslas, and then also what does this demand look like moving forward, and are there any underlying trends that are propelling this demand? So for Tesla, they're kind of sitting in a perfect storm because we see electric vehicle demand ramping significantly. This continues to build higher. Every time we check it, I feel like every time I come on this show that year-over-year percentage increase in consumers who are talking about purchasing an electric vehicle has risen, now up over 170% year over year. And I think this is really starting to, make a splash in the overall automobile market whenever it comes to consumer mind share. Whenever we look at Tesla versus these traditional auto peers, we see that they're dominating the mind share from a consumer demand perspective and what consumers are excited about. And not only are they dominating this mind share, they're expanding this mind share. So you can see this is up by about 10% on a year-over-year basis in terms of people who are talking about the types of vehicles that they want to purchase. So when we see things like this, it helps us, at least from a long-term perspective, to say, okay, obviously, Tesla was the first mover in this electric vehicle space, and they're continuing to benefit in this space. And so, so far our data does support the booming demand that Tesla has already kind of revealed to investors.
Megan, help me with your year-over-year change in purchase intent. Help me show our viewers and interpret this data, because you're seeing some massive numbers out of the F-150 and the Mustang. Ford put out good news this morning. Their stock is moving based on that. But Tesla's got impressive numbers. They're just not as big as the ones ahead of them. But in terms of overall numbers, Tesla's still the biggest by a lion's share, right? I mean, these guys are growing, but they're not still even in the ballpark of Tesla, correct?
Correct. Whenever we look at Tesla mentions per day, we're talking about over 20,000 mentions per day on average that we're pulling in for people talking about Tesla or one of their vehicles. These numbers are much, much smaller, but I think it does show that there is starting to be some competent competition for Tesla, specifically out of Ford, which I think that probably surprised a lot of people to see Ford really rising up and starting to get involved in this. And I think if you look at that kind of that market share chart as well, you see Ford was one of the legacy automakers that had some positive tractions in terms of consumer mind share. So this kind of adoption and embracement of the EV market is working for Ford, just like it's working for Tesla. But Tesla is still the main player here, just from a volume perspective. I don't think it's even close. The reason that we couldn't put some of those other names, the Rivians, the Lucid, on this pie chart that you're looking at is because the volume was so low that it just made it crowded. I believe that combined it was less than 1% of that total chart, just to give some scale there. So you're definitely right. Tesla is still by far the dominant player, but it is something to be aware of that competition is coming into the market.
Yeah, and I think that's the big key, and I kind of wanted to ask about that data because we're starting to see those mentions start to really pick up for Ford, especially on the release of the F-150 Lightning, and then also the Mach-E's doing really well. Yeah. As more competitors actually come to market, I know Tesla's got that first to market leg up on everybody, but also that software connected service that a lot of the consumers like. Now, as we ramp up, Megan, are you starting to see maybe those mentions start to come into play? Because if you look at vehicle purchase intent, those pie charts, Tesla's still far ahead of their peers. Will the others catch up because they have the ability to scale quicker because they're already part of it, right?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely something that we need to monitor. You know, we're seeing this tremendous demand from Ford. I know that there's been some mentions recently with GM as well, as these different players start to embrace this electric vehicle kind of shift in this change in mindset. But this is one of those things where the demand is, I think, so overwhelming for these electric vehicles that it can still, you know, kind of a rising tide lifts a lot of boats here. And so far, Tesla has proven that it can execute and it can produce these high quality vehicles. Whenever we look at Tesla consumer happiness, even amid this giant demand surge and production ramp, that happiness has remained stable at about 72% positive and is significantly higher than its more, you know, traditional peers. So they've definitely got a superior experience working for them. I think another interesting note you can see on this bar chart, this is, you know, the current quarter pace for the next quarter, the quarter that we're in, that they're not reporting on. And you can see that that demand is continuing to build on top of what we saw in this last quarter where we already know that. So I think that this is a pretty nice nod toward guidance, and that may be something that people will be listening for. You know, is this demand sustained? You know, are more and more consumers still wanting to buy more and more Teslas? And at least from our perspective, which tends to be very forward-looking, yes. Even whenever we look at deliveries, you know, we try to get ahead and we try to look at those mentions of people who are talking about actually receiving their Tesla just in this last month versus last quarter. And we see those up about 6% versus the prior quarter. So I think that that's also another positive sign that they're able to kind of maintain these levels of execution that they've previously hit.
Yeah. And, you know, with gas prices at or near record prices, do you see that where anytime gas starts to go up, you got oil over 87 bucks a barrel, that, hey, those purchase intent mentions are going to continue to move higher? And I mean, if you look at the total addressable market, Megan, you know, EVs are still only about 10% of all cars sold. Yeah. So will that continue to move higher as more and more people look to get out of, you know, buying a car that uses gas, and the fact that, you know, 90% of the people that have cars aren't using EVs?
Yeah, you know, Andy and I were talking about this earlier today, and we really feel like this is a really big tipping point in the sense that all of a sudden EVs are an actual viable option for consumers. The experience of owning an electric vehicle is similar, if not better, to owning a traditional vehicle. You know, gas prices are top of consumer mind. We see that data as well. We see that rising tremendously just in terms of importance from a consumer of like, this is something that I'm thinking about and this is something that matters to me. So obviously, electric vehicles are a natural beneficiary of this. And then also just the overall price of these vehicles are starting to come down comparatively whenever you look at the other vehicles, just traditional vehicles on the market. So I think you kind of have this perfect storm brewing where consumers are beginning to accept this more, and there's definitely plenty of room for this segment for electric vehicles to expand. So far, Tesla is the leader, but you know, obviously valuations are extremely high, and we definitely expect some volatility near term, but at least from our data, from a consumer perspective, the demand is there.
What's the earnings score for this stock for you guys out of LikeFolio?
This one's pretty high. For us, Tesla is sitting at a 67. So I think yesterday when we talked about Microsoft, it was a 39, and we were cautiously bullish. But for Tesla, we definitely see the demand there. We have a much stronger bullish signal. But in terms of, you know, valuation and what the market is expecting, I'll leave that for you guys to suss out. I'm excited to see what you guys think too.
Yeah, you guys nailed it on the Microsoft. It didn't look good early, but Microsoft recovered very quickly in the aftermarket yesterday. All right, Megan, great stuff as always. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.